Okay, hello. I am Chris Peterson. This is ICS 382 with Jennifer Grant. And today we will be talking about the 2016 DNC hacks. So the 2015 and 2016 DNC hacks, I think, is one of the greatest events, at least in my opinion, in cybersecurity history. It is the story of how one man sending a typo in an email led to QAnon and its supporters storming the Capitol January 16th. Now, I can't get in to that whole story today, obviously, and it is obviously somewhat hyperbole for the sake of creating a narrative. It denies the material reality that led to the election of Trump and the creation of QAnon. But the story of the DNC hacks, it really provides us with it provides us as cybersecurity experts with a cautionary tale that teaches us how the DNC failed to protect itself against phishing attacks and how we can best protect ourselves and our organizations against phishing attacks in the future. So our story starts in 2015, in September of 2015, with one of our characters, a young DNC IT staffer named Yared Temeni. He receives a call from an FBI agent. This agent informs him that they believed at least one DNC computer had been compromised by a sphere phishing attack by a group the U.S. intelligence community had dubbed the Dukes. The Dukes, which are better known today as the Russian hacking group Cozy Bear, had been familiar to the FBI for at least the past year. The Dutch intelligence service had actually infiltrated Cozy Bear in the summer of 2014, and they reported to the FBI that they believed Cozy Bear was targeting U.S. government groups, including the Democratic Party, and that they were targeting these groups using a hacking technique known as spear phishing. So spear phishing, as opposed to a more general type of phishing attack, is when the attacker targets a specific organization and they craft these kind of tailored emails and messages to infiltrate the target. So the DNC hacks are a particularly interesting case study of spear phishing, because today we can actually view the actual spear phishing emails that the hacker sent out, and we will look at those emails later on. But for now, this IT staffer, he receives a call from the FBI that his system has just been infiltrated, and what does he do about it? Well, basically nothing. He thought it may be a prank call, so he Googled the Dukes, and he briefly checked the system to make sure that nothing was seriously wrong with it. But he didn't really do anything about that. He didn't even attempt to verify that he was talking to a real FBI officer. It wasn't until 8 months later that a monitoring system was finally installed on the server that would allow the DNC to find any sorts of intrusions in the system. This was really only the first error in the comedy of errors that is the DNC hack of 2016. But thankfully for this young staffer, it was overshadowed by a much, much bigger hack in early 2016. And to be fair to this young staffer, even this was not the first oversight by the DNC in September of 2015. That same month, the DNC received the phone call from the FBI. They coincidentally had scheduled a cybersecurity risk assessment from a consulting firm called Good Harbor Security. This group spent 2 months going through the DNC security measures and interviewing key staff members. And what they found was that the DNC had many outdated systems in place, including an outdated firewall, and they lacked malware detection systems on many individual staff members' computers, meaning many of the cybersecurities put in place by the DNC, if there were in fact any at all, were not uniformly mandated by the leadership. And according to anonymous DNC staffers, none of the recommendations that the Good Harbor Security Group made to the DNC were actually implemented. This is despite the fact that federal filings show the DNC paid Good Harbor over $60,000 to do this security review. So why would the DNC spend all this money for advice just to ignore this advice? Well, it's probably just incompetence, but, and this is just fun speculation, the head of Good Harbor Security was a former Clinton administration official, so it's incredibly likely that they were just, finding a way to get their friends paid, and the cybersecurity review was just a very, very unfortunate, funny coincidence. But again, it's probably just due to incompetence within the DNC leadership. So now, the big hack that is probably the most famous began in March of 2016 with former Chief of Staff and current Clinton Senior Advisor John Podesta receiving this sketchy email that claimed someone had tried to log into his account from Ukraine. So on the surface, it looks like a pretty standard email that, you might get to reset your password after a weird login attempt. And the DNC did use Gmail, so, it's reasonable to think that Podesta would have gotten an email like this. But there are a few things that jump out to you about it. Firstly, and probably most obviously, the change password link doesn't actually directly link you to Google, but instead links you to a bit.ly link shortening link. This bit.ly link was, according to the FBI, how the hackers were able to evade Google spam filter. But crucially, however, Podesta did not actually click the link in the email at the time when he got it. He understood that something was off about it, so he referred it to his aides, and his aides asked one of their senior IT staffers about the email. And so they got a response from that IT staffer by email, and this was his response. This is a legitimate email. John needs to change his password immediately and ensure that two-factor authentication is turned on his account. He can go to this link. It is absolutely imperative that this is done ASAP. Now, obviously, this staffer made the very stupid mistake of just typing legitimate instead of not legitimate. He even followed up this very basic mistake by telling John Podesta to do exactly what the phishing email told him to do. Although it is good advice, in general, to change your password and ensure that you have two-factor authentication turned on. But so because of this one staffer's typo, Podesta ends up being hacked. His emails end up getting leaked to WikiLeaks, which ends up causing the chairman of the DNC to resign. It ends up leading to Pizzagate and QAnon, and ultimately, you could argue that it ended up leading to Donald Trump being elected. But this can be a very fun narrative to kind of talk about this kind of domino effect. But it doesn't actually get to the heart of why the DNC's cybersecurity failed them. This narrative, along actually with this very omnipresent Russian interference narrative that's so common today, it fails to take into account the many, many, many cybersecurity failures that occurred at all levels of the DNC. The DNC had virtually no policies in place for what to do if a hack occurred. They didn't even have a system in place to monitor their servers for intrusions until months after the first intrusion happened. Additionally, they clearly didn't mandate any real basic cybersecurity policies, as the security review that they got from Good Harbor, that they basically ignored, stated that the staffers were basically on their own for malware monitoring systems, and that the DNC itself was using very outdated systems. So you can argue that like a lot of these lower level IT staffers, screwed up, and they clearly made some stupid mistakes. But the leadership of the DNC showed a complete and utter disregard for even the most basic cybersecurity. There's no guarantee, that putting in place, these cybersecurity policies would have stopped an attack from happening, but it certainly would have at least limited the scope of the attack. And we know this precisely because these policies were, in fact, implemented during the 2020 election by the new Chief Information Security Officer at the DNC, who is Bob Lord. So Lord, who is formerly a cybersecurity expert at Yahoo, who actually had to clean up after a hack done there in 2014, so Lord, he implemented some very basic cybersecurity policies, such as making sure everyone has two-factor authentication enabled, running software updates regularly, and not reusing old passwords. So using these policies, the DNC was able to avoid a repeat of 2016. To quote Lord, the DNC's 2016 breach wasn't so much a cybersecurity issue as it was a problem of workflow and corporate culture. And I think at the end of the day, I think the most important lesson of the DNC hacks and how to avoid phishing scams for yourself in the future is that many times in situations like these, it is not, the problem that systems can't be put in place, there's not enough money for X, Y, and Z, or that the hackers are just too good at hacking, but rather it is the lack of any sort of basic regard for cybersecurity at all. Because we have seen time and time again, when people put even the most basic efforts towards cybersecurity, it exponentially increases their organization's defenses.